What's up, girlfriends? Welcome to Girlfriend Therapy Podcast. You guys know for 2023, we started an entirely new series, and I'm so incredibly excited about it. It is Tell Yourself Your Story. And I'm sure you guys are wondering, what does that even mean? First of all, we are often listening to other people's stories, but sometimes we don't tell ourselves our stories, like where we've come from, where we're going, and not even filling in the blanks in between all that. So telling ourselves our story helps us to take a pause within our own life and figure out, like, hey, where did I come from and where am I going? And am I prepared to get to where I'm going? And that's some work you can do in the background. But I'm excited to have some amazing, beautiful, influential women join me on this podcast series. And today I have the beautiful and lovely Miss Carolyn Gray. And Carolyn's going to tell you a lot more about herself, but I want to share with you guys, she has several businesses and several endeavors that she is working, and Noir Bud is one of them, which is a CBD, and I'm sure she'll tell us more about it. I actually have her calming scent, which has been amazing, and it's just like a roll-on, guys. I literally roll it on, and I'll just breathe it in, and it is so amazing. But I'm sure we'll hear more about that. But I want to get into this storytelling with Miss Carolyn Gray. So, Carolyn, thank you for joining me. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And tell us, who is Carolyn Gray?
You know, when I thought about the concept of your show and the kinds of questions you might ask, I'm like, this is literally a way to create a novel. So thinking of myself as a character in the book that I'm writing, I was like, Carolyn Gray is someone who has many God-given talents, creative ideas, and she has a light that tends to lead people in a very positive way. So that's the premise of the character, and her lifelong, I guess, gift or character description.
No, I love that. I love that you said has a light that tends to lead, which is really powerful to even recognize that within yourself, because sometimes we're always looking for someone else's light. But to recognize that, no, I have the light, like that is powerful. So many people don't realize that. So I want to put a pin in that for people to catch that and not lose it, because we all do have a light within ourselves that we have to recognize. So I love that so much. So this is, I'm excited.
It's important to recognize and protect it.
Absolutely.
And to use it well also.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I love that so much. So thinking about your life, like from beginning to now, excuse me, what would you say that your story reflects? Like, so in other words, like you would say this is a story of just kind of fill in that blank. What's some commentary around it, but this is a story of.
I think this is a story of a human being who, I think from a really young age, she knew, or I knew, that there was something that is much bigger than me, as far as a purpose that I had to fill, that had to do with helping and serving others in a non-traditional way. And I remember my dad always, he used to get really, well, he still does. He gets really excited about, I would be a kid and singing in the car, and I'll be able to imitate the exact same flow of that singer or rapper. I'll imitate or be able to act like a Caribbean person. Like I could do accents really well as a kid. And he used to tell me, he was like, ever since you were a little girl, like a toddler, you would take your little toddler friends and take them to meet another toddler friend, and you would make them hug and then walk away, and then they'll become friends. He was like, you were always very diplomatic as a kid. Oh,
I love it.
So, it's just been, I've always known that I have a certain purpose and that I love connecting other people, connecting the dots, helping people. Sometimes I don't take my own advice, and sometimes it's really good advice, and I still don't even listen to myself. But I think that this journey I've been on is just trying to figure out exactly, like, I'll look up and say, what is this, what you need me to do? Like, tell me, what is it? Like, I want to do it. I want to do it really well, and I think for a long time, that has been my mindset and my action. That's my process. like it's always been intentional. But from a little girl, I've known, I'm like, I'm not supposed to have like a quiet life.
I
I'm supposed
love
to make
that.
noise.
Uh, that kind of hit me too. I'm not supposed to have a quiet life because I'm often trying to have this quiet life, like this kind of,
Mm,
I don't know what it is or why it is. But just kind of not wanting to be in the front, but
mm,
sometimes you just find yourself there. And so I can that feeling of not supposed to have a quiet life really resonates with me. And
yeah.
I'll probably have to unpack that a little bit more for
Yeah.
myself.
I
You're
think
saying a lot of things that I'm like, I need to study that because that, yeah,
I think we're all meant to serve,
yeah,
right? Um, we're definitely meant to serve, and it's supposed to be a balance, about allowing to allowing ourselves to be served and then
yeah,
taking that same energy and flowing it back to serve someone else at the same time. I think there's times where it is okay to be in the back end. It is okay because our foundation, our stability is needed for other
for
people,
sure.
but I think it's important to also recognize the times where we can stand out and say, yeah, this is me. Like this is my space. I have the floor right now.
Yeah,
Not being afraid of that or thinking that we have to dim the light on that moment because we want to stay humble.
right.
Humility works through a lot of different ways, and being proud or brave about yourself, it doesn't mean you're not humble. It just means that you
Exactly.
recognize yourself.
I love it. I have to take a note on that one. So I know that you currently live in New York, but tell us like the setting. Where did you grow up? Where are you from? And I know all these answers, but I just for the people to know.
Right, right. So I was born in Baltimore, and my mom is from Aruba. My dad is from
Oh
Baltimore,
wow.
born and raised. So as a little girl, I spent a lot of time in Aruba, actually a couple years in a row, and then I would go back every summer. And my grandmother and my aunt Lona, they raised me with my other
Um,
cousins in Aruba. So I had a lot of exposure to the island lifestyle. And then being in Baltimore too, I was really exposed to like my father's side of the family that was from there. And, that's a family full of really strong Black women who were activists and always had something to say, will curse you out, love you at the same time. So I had a lot of amazing
mm,
influences between my mom's side of the family and that Dutch Caribbean culture. My grandmother on that side was literally a saint and just so
mm,
nurturing and so lovely. And then I would come back to Baltimore. My grandmother on that side she was rough around the edges and she was always speaking up for somebody or marching in some march. So I had a lot of exposure to a lot of balance, I think. And my father's a photographer. So
oh
I also
wow.
grew up in like a warehousey studio and he was always doing a photo shoot. And, that was also, I don't think my father gets it to this day, but he exposed me to a lot of different type of people. I was
Mm,
raised around um gay men who taught me how to do my makeup. My mother didn't
right,
teach me. Uncle Robert did. You know what I mean?
right,
Uncle
right.
Antoine told me how to style my clothes. So and these were his friends that he loved and accepted, and they accepted him and they worked together.
Yeah,
They may not have felt the same way about their own sexualities and things of that nature. They respected each other for where they were and who they
yes,
were. And I think seeing that without having to be explained what the relationships were, to me, it equipped me with a bigger understanding of everyone is just human.
yeah.
So, I was always immersed in fashion and photography. And then my mom's a respiratory therapist. So she was always saving somebody's life and acting like it wasn't nothing. I'm like, did
Wow.
you kept 7 kids alive today? Like you resuscitated a dead woman. Like
Right.
people are like, oh God, it's just been a long day. I'm like, she is
Wow.
superhero and she acting like it's not that. So
Exactly.
I was always blessed to just really see my parents for what they did for the world around them and also just witnessing their complexities as a couple too was interesting.
Yeah.
I won't get
Wow.
into that too deep, but like they taught me what love is and what it isn't. So I think when I moved to New York, I always wanted to be here. I told them, I was like, y'all supposed to have me in New York. I'm just gonna tell y'all that now. But it's all right. I'll figure out my own way to get there. And I did. I moved here when I was just shy of 18 after high
Wow.
school. And I went to Fashion Institute of Technology. It was the only school I did an early application for and I got into. And I was like, okay, I don't want to apply to any other school. So I don't even know what other schools I would have gotten into because that was my only school that I wanted.
Wow.
And I got here and it was like I hit the ground running. I never grew up in a city neighborhood. Like I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland County, like
Right.
Randallstown, Owings Mills. I went to Catholic school my whole life. So
Wow.
my father was terrified dropping me off here. And he said that the moment they dropped me off, he saw something change in me.
Mm.
He was like, I think she's got it and I think she knows what she's doing. And it took
Wow.
some crying in the subway thinking I was lost several blocks away from where I needed to be and getting hustled by some people trying to sell something that didn't exist. Like I got nickel and dimed here a few times, but I never got into really serious trouble. I've
Right.
always been able to maintain my way and I had several jobs at any given time maintaining a good
Wow.
GPA, so I've always had my hands in a lot of different areas, and it I think it just goes down to the fact that I was exposed to so many forms of life and possibilities
Yeah.
that moving to New York, it was just like whatever I can do, I'm gonna do. And I was never that kid to skip school. I never did drugs. I'm not a drinker or anything like that. I've always had a good head on my shoulders and just was a straight arrow. But I
Yeah.
take a lot of risk in different ways when it comes to like careers and friendships and stuff like that. So
I love that. You said
yeah,
so many great nuggets that I want to pull out. One, I think that you were very observant as a child, and I love that and appreciate how, you were not just there, taking in this space, but you were observing what was happening and learning people and, just the
yeah,
exposure of it and taking advantage of that. Um,
yeah,
but then I love the fact when you talk about when your dad dropped you off. Well, first of all, knowing that you wanted to be in New York and finding the way to get there, tapping into which probably was just like this natural desire for you, which is fashion, and maybe seeing that through the lens of your dad. But
yeah,
then when he dropped you off, firstly being concerned, but then seeing something flip and change in you. I can say as a parent, like that's
mhm,
a very real thing. Like when you look at your child and you're like, okay, I know them to be this, but then when they're in their element and they just something awakens in them, as a
mhm,
parent, that is like the most amazing sight to see in your child.
mm.
So for your dad to see that and be like, okay, she's going to be okay. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that.
No,
Um,
it's true. You see them become their own person, like
exactly. And people think like I have my son is 30. He'll be
okay.
31 in a couple of weeks, and my daughter is 27. And I tell you, my husband and I were just talking about this. They're so different, and you
Mhm.
really kind of have to, as a parent, show up where they are and just
Yeah.
kind of support them in where they are.
Mhm.
But I was sharing with my husband. I said, my son, I always knew like he was like, I need to go to a HBCU. I need to be around my people. He's
Yeah.
very artsy, very creative. My daughter is very, very ethereal. Like she's very brainsy, and so she's my little PhD. And but they're
Oh,
so different, but they're so amazing. And I will get on there. Like I don't follow my son on social media, but my daughter
really?
will. Yeah, because he's just he's a lot of fun, but
That is
I'm
so
like,
funny.
but I have to call, but I love to watch him on social media. So
Uh-huh.
my daughter-in-law, she'll share like they're at a club or something, and he's just like out there dancing, and he has a cigar and all this stuff, and I'm just like, oh my baby, So I'm just,
Right.
yeah, I'm
Oh,
like their biggest fan.
that's so cool though. I
Yeah.
get it. Both of my parents follow me on social, not constantly tagged. I'm like, look at your friend Amelia. Look at Ricky doing X, Y, and Z. Look at my kids now. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. But it's really cool just to see, see you all come into your own. So I can
Mhm.
really appreciate that and love what your dad said. Um, so I know that fashion is something that you're really interested in going into the what is it, the Fashion Institute of Technology.
Yes.
So going into that, tell us a little bit about like, because I would think that that's kind of like you're in New York, Carolyn Gray in New York, doing her fashion thing, tapping into all of the different avenues that allow you to express yourself through fashion. So what are some of the other things that you've done, or how did you get into fashion coming out of school?
Okay. Well, I mean, I was always a really artsy kid. I would do competitions here in Baltimore.
Mm,
My work was displayed in museums there. So I had a
wow.
teacher named Mrs. Gill. And Miss Gill, she was a quirky person, but she said to me, she was like, I noticed like you're really into putting an outfit together and like fashion. You really love fashion pieces. And I didn't realize that, a lot of my artwork was surrounded
Wow.
by, you know, different garments or inspired by, or I would use fabrication in my art. And she was like, I think you should look into FIT. And this was just, a fleeting conversation. Like, I didn't think too much of it. And I was
Wow.
like, well, I do need to think about what college I want to go to, and a lot of my friends, they were talking about Seton Hall, HBCUs as well, those types of places. And I said, no, Miss Gill said something about a fashion school. So I looked into it.
Wow.
And as soon as I got here, and I think it was my first or second day on campus, the author, and I think she oversaw the division that my study was in. So I went to school for merchandising management.
Okay.
Um, Elaine something. Now her name is escaping my mind. I feel bad, but she wrote our main textbook for that group, right? So we were at like a tea party welcoming the new freshman students, and I went right up to her and I said, "All right, well, I'm here, and I need to know what I need to do from
I
like
love
besides
it.
going to school, like what is it?" And she was like, "You need to get all the experience you can, work your
Mhm.
ass off." And I said, "Okay, so I gotta get a job." Right. So I told my mom, and my mom is pretty traditional, like she's Catholic, she's like, you got to do your school and X, Y, and Z, you have to check all the
Yeah.
boxes. And I said, they said I need to work, like I need to be an intern, I need to go for the magazines and all that. She said, not for your first semester. I don't want you working. You need to focus. And so I gritted through those like first few months of that semester, and I said, okay, Ma, like I did really good this semester. Can I go for a job? And as soon as I got back from holiday break, I hit the pavement and I got my
Oh,
first job
wow.
at Barney's, New York. So I got a job at Barney's, New York, and I was a fitting room attendant for the security
Oh,
team.
wow.
And I was like, it was fun,
I
but I
love
found
it.
out about another woman named Laura Mannix, who started the concept of studio services. So those companies, the production companies that are making films and TV shows,
Uh,
video shoots, they pull from different department stores and use a department called studio services to rent the clothing, pay a certain amount, and then bring it back or purchase it all, whatever, when they're done. So she created that concept at Barney's, and I
wow.
stalked her, found her office, which was like in the crevice of the building. Like you couldn't find it just like
Oh my
regular. I had
gosh.
to go in the back and find her. And she, I approached her again as a
Wow.
18-year-old, 17-year-old kid. I was going to people's doors and I didn't even knock. I was just opening the damn door. And I said, I got
I love it.
they said that you the one I got to talk to. So
Listen.
I spoke to her and she told me, she was like, no, I've seen you on the floor. Like, you know how to dress. Like you don't really belong on the security team. So she
Wow.
managed a way to get me to become an intern for her during the holiday season. So
Wow.
that was my first introduction to celebrity styling. Like I pulled clothes for $1 million tours for Celine Dion, Janet Jackson.
Wow.
I've worked with supermodels, Tyra Banks I pulled and
Wow.
helped. Diddy. I worked with
Wow.
Diddy. So it was like those were my experiences when I was at Barney's, New York. And from there, I worked at different stores in New York, like Atrium, which was a pillar of like real individual personal style here in New York. Like if you
Mhm.
grew up in New York, you knew that that was the store that you would go to get fresh, and like that was the first point of like style. And
Right.
then working with school, I also was the president of a Black Retail Action Group, which is a national
Wow.
organization to help students in high school and in college, students of color, to get scholarships, to get their internships and first jobs. So I was the president of the FIT chapter. I was a scholarship winner for from what's it called? Elle Magazine, the publication that owned Elle Magazine at that time. So when I
Wow.
got the scholarship, I once again I walked up on the CEO and I said, "So, are you doing the internship for the Black Retail Action Group this summer?
I
Like, did you
love it.
know?" And this is like an older white French man, and standing next to Jill Ben Simone, which is one of the
Wow.
best fashion photographers out there. Okay. And he was creative director at the time, Jill Ben Simone. And I'm talking to them. I'm like, y'all should really just get into this internship program. And like when I say get into it, I mean like put me as an intern. And when Brad got back to me, they were like, "What did you say to those men? Because they're gonna do the internship." I said, "I just asked them."
Wow. I
Like
love
I
it.
told them to give me the money in the envelope for my scholarship, but also give me some more money, right?
Yeah.
So I was never really afraid to just have these conversations. You know, obviously there were times I put my foot in my mouth and looked like a whole ass, but trial and error, so
Exactly.
there were so many points in my college career where, I just I just walked through a door
I
and I
love
said
it.
what I need to say. And my style spoke for myself first. And then whatever I said out my mouth, I had some sense. I didn't always
Right.
have common sense before moving to New York. My father always said, common sense ain't common with you sometimes. I just don't get it. But then that switch, I guess that's a common sense switch. And I was always able to just present myself well and just ask for not so much an opportunity. I never really asked for an opportunity. I always asked, what do I need to do? What
Mm.
requirements do I need to fulfill this position? I would like to go for this position, but what do you feel that you need out of
Yeah.
me first? Oh, in interviews, I always ask, what happened with the last person that you felt that you weren't fulfilled in this role? And like, how do you see the next person fulfilling that? What do you feel like you need now? So I always just networked and managed my way through different types of circles, and I
Yeah.
always spoke up. So I had a lot of experiences in fashion, whether it was at Barney's, Elle Magazine, working on TV shows, um, working at Saks Fifth Avenue, whether it was
Wow.
going from customer service all the way to the buying team, buying brands that I literally used to stare at through magazines when my
Wow.
father was working, like Azadine Alaya, Michael Kors, um, studying works of Bobby Brown, the makeup artist, and now literally working with her and
Wow.
knowing her, so I've always had you said it, I've always been a very observant person.
Yeah.
And then when I see an opportunity, I never really used my network though. I never said, well, I know this person at this place, I'm going to ask them if they can get me a job. I would just tell them, oh yeah, I was there yesterday and I asked HR about the job. I already had the interview, so I don't know.
Right.
I might see you next week when I start. Like, I never really used my friendships in those types of way, but
Yeah.
I showed up where I needed to show up, and I asked the right questions.
It's interesting. I was going to ask, like, especially the ability to just walk up to people and introduce yourself and say, "Hey, this is where I see we connect." I was going to ask you, where do you think that came from? But I feel like I know the answer. But
You
um,
know what? I'm gonna be really honest. I'm always like shaking or like sweating when I'm doing it. Um, I think I get it from both of my parents,
mm,
and it's a good mixture because I think my father has always been very thoughtful. He's always thoroughly thought about what he was going to say to someone, and he always
right.
made sure that he knew about this person. Like I think I'm not going to tell the story well, but I remember one time he had an opportunity to work with Whoopi Goldberg when she was in Baltimore for a film.
Wow.
I think it was a premiere or something, and she's not so open to talking to anybody on the street. Obviously, she's Whoopi Goldberg.
Right.
So he's like sitting behind her and he taps her on her shoulder and he gave her a compliment and he also gave her a newspaper clipping about her. And
Mm.
that he's always had something either in hand or a very like knowledgeable fact about that
Yeah.
where he lets them understand that I see you past this stuff. I see you for your core. And
Yeah.
that's something I always like, oh, like that's, that's how you connect to humans. And then when it comes to my mom, she don't have no filter, man. Like she don't care if you're down, she gonna still say it if you're down. Like she don't care. So I think that brave, unfiltered,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it. And if I regret it, oh well. So I think a mixture of just having that my mom's bravery and unfiltered behavior and just knocking through whatever door she wanted to go through. And then my dad just being really thoughtful in how he connected to people. That's the
Wow.
mixture of where I got that from. And then my nana, she was bold too.
Right.
So bold.
I love that. How we can see that we take so many pieces from our parents, which I think is important as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes, as we grow up, they always say, you either do what they've done or you do the exact opposite, but there's
Mhm.
always something to learn from people.
Yes.
And so I love that you took like the strengths of your parents and kind of adopted that as a part of your personality and um, just so many things that you've said. But what are some of the conflicts or some of the things that maybe even challenge you even still today? You mean even knowing that you have this ability to just reach out to people and make those connections, but are there any other conflicts or things that kind of I know you mentioned doing it afraid. Like, what are
Yeah.
some of those things that make you feel afraid?
Well, I think there's this magic that we have when we're really young and
Mm.
naive, right? And we
Oh,
just
that's so
do it,
good.
right?
Yeah,
We don't care. I mean, anything we wanted to do, it was unlimited. I think as a
yeah,
child, you don't care. Like you're like, well, why not? Like, let's do it. You just have this very whimsical thing
yeah,
about life. And then when you start to experiences some low points, some so-called failures or what we
yeah.
feel is a failure, right? We start doubting things. We're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Mm.
Or if I did that, then that would have happened. And we start going through this spiral of questioning every step, especially if it's like a traumatic thing.
Yeah.
And I was at Saks, for example. I I graduated from FIT and I got that buying position a few months before graduation. I applied to the program and I got into it. Upon graduating or being able to walk at graduation, I had like one zero credit class that kept my
Mm.
my certificate. So it was like a regular math class. And I learned about it after I got the job. So I had to go to work every day during this program, show face, and then go to school at 6 p.m. for like a couple months to get this
Right.
stupid zero credit class done, right? So I can get my actual degree. And it was not, it was the stupidest thing. And being in the program, I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna know about this zero credit
Mm.
class. And I'm trying to keep my head above water and I'm doing the best I can. Some of this stuff is gibberish. Like, I don't know if this is really what I want to do. Like all these things I'm thinking about, even though I've done what I need to do to get there, I'm still second
Yeah.
guessing everything. And at the end of that 6 months that I was in that program, I was under a buyer who is one of the biggest known Black female names in the industry. Her name was June Horn, and she was one of the biggest buyers in New York that brought in many brands,
Wow.
whether it was Michael Kors, Donna Karan, or new brands like Derek Lam, Jason Wu. So she was like the Devil Wears Prada, but at Saks Avenue, and a Black woman at that, right?
Wow.
Somehow I was very lucky to be assigned to her department working
Wow.
directly under her. And because I had so many distractions and so many like, I was questioning everything. I was scared as a 21-year-old in this program. she told me, and I did tell her about the zero credit class. She told me that I should resign and that I didn't ask enough questions. And at this time, I was very sensitive, and it crushed me. It crushed me because I'm like, but I just started to really get the hang of this at 6 months. Like, I think I can still do it. And like, I finished the class, I got my degree. She was just like, I just don't think that this is the right job for you.
Wow.
And, I didn't talk about it with my mentors in that space at the same time, which were also two other Black women that really were like, when they found out that I resigned, they were very mad. They were like, I wish you would have told us, like, we would have really deterred you from doing that. Like, we need you here, and that opinion of June Horn, it probably took me 2 years to get over and to like get a job that I actually respected. And it took me a while to find a job. Like I went back to Atrium because that was my old roots. And then after a while, I was so in my head, I ended up getting fired from there. I got fired from there like 3-4 times. It's family. But I got fired from there. And then I just had this season where I couldn't get a job. And this was like the recession 2010, and things were still like crawling back up to being healthy within, the workforce. And I went through a really bad spell of depression, had a really bad relationship. And I think when you experience life at such a low point, you start creating these other conflicts within yourself that when you are back at where you need to be mentally, spiritually, you start second guessing things like, well, we start holding back, even though we should still do it, right? So I think that I had a couple of years after graduating from FIT that was really dark times for me. And that's when I figured therapy was a really good thing for me too, because I started to get out of it, finding a church home. Those are different things that I started to do when I started to come out of that darkness. But even when I came into the light again, the traumatic, the PTSD of it all, always creep in. And there were times I could have been doing content creation. And I would have friends that would say certain things that I'm like, oh, I don't know. Okay, maybe I shouldn't do it. Or, I had people say, you should just stick to one thing. Like, why are you all over the place? And then I felt like a mess all the time. I would do stand up and comedy, and I had an ex-boyfriend that was just like, you're doing too much, and I would allow those people to hold me back, So at the end of the day, people's like their words would hold me back, but then also I always am accountable for myself, though. I allowed, and I didn't navigate that well, where those words shouldn't have hurt me as much, but they did. And I had to learn through that. So now if somebody says, oh, you being too extra, X, Y, and Z, I'm like, well, you just gonna have to deal with it. I had to learn through that to get to this point in life, to be brave enough to do certain things, even if sometimes I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna turn out well. I don't know if I did everything I was supposed to do for this, but I'm gonna just wait for the best and hit that go button, So it's still internal conflicts that happen on a regular basis. Sometimes I'll press post to a YouTube episode. I don't even know if I sound like anything in this. Like, do I make sense?
Oh my gosh. But it's something when you talk about, like, especially someone that is in an industry that you love and you look up to them, or you kind of can see them as a mentor or someone that you really respect. And then when they tell you, no, you're not, that kind of hits a little different than, anybody else saying something. And it does make you a little gun shy. And as you're sharing that story, I'm thinking about even my own story, how I had, similar experiences, which is why I love this so much, because it reminds me to tap back into that fearless young girl who was just like, no, it's just no, it's whatever. Whereas now it's like, I don't want to hear no, I don't, you kind of shy away from things that you think is not going to work. But it's like, if you don't get anything else, you learn.
Exactly.
And so I personally need to get back to that. So I thank you so much for sharing that story, because I think there's a lot of people, you're looking at the person that's doing it and doing it in a way that that you desire. And then when they kind of close the door, then you know, I can imagine that you're kind of like, okay, well, am I good enough? Does it make sense? Am I doing it right? And that kind of can linger with you way longer than it needs to.
And,
Um,
and you know what else though? I think in those moments you regret that you weren't open-minded enough to find the good in the
mm,
situation. So that, you know, but also I had so many other women that I looked up to, like the two mentors at Saks Fifth Avenue.
yeah,
Mentor, she is still my mentor, Nadia Spencer, you know, and these were the people who loved and accepted me. And Nadia always used to
exactly.
say this thing that she was like, you know, this is my young bull. One day I'm gonna work for her, you know, and
I
she always
love
had
it.
that mindset where she never really felt she always made me feel that she is the one to look up to. Like you learn so much from her, and
Yeah,
like, I'm here to soak it all in. But she's also very unafraid of the tables turning and
love it.
me. And because there were times I'm like, you know, we might
Absolutely.
have to work on this project. I might have to hire you for, and this was my mentor that I'm thinking of hiring. You know what I mean? And
Exactly.
to me, that always resonated really deeply because I'm not going to not help the one that's a couple years behind me or still in the process of learning
Exactly.
certain things. Like, no, I'm going to look to you because you might actually have more insight. So, you know, I've always been a big believer of like, if I meet a younger person, like a younger version of me, I'm not going to hate on them.
Exactly.
I'm not going to like deter from building this relationship. I'm like, no, come with me.
Yeah,
Meet me, pull up to my house if you want to, you know, like we could learn together. I'm
exactly.
never disconnected from that reality. And I think especially in our community, that happens a lot.
Unfortunately, it does. Two questions. So, one, like in your industry, it moved like the fashion industry. I think people that's outside of it don't really recognize it, but it's a fast moving industry. I mean, I'm just learning, like, you know, when you're seeing fashions on the runway, that I mean, they are a year ahead of. Is it a year? Like, how does it? Because the
It
timing is not like real time, right?
it is a year ahead. It's a year ahead and it's always moving. And it's
Yeah,
weird because like I'm thoroughly involved and I know the ins and outs of the fashion industry. I work as a creator, and it's like I'm now relearning the fashion industry through the lens of
right.
digital marketing and influencing, which is a totally new space. And then I have the CBD brand, and I'm just like trying to navigate that too. So I think that one thing I learned last year for sure is the fashion calendar, how they
Hmm.
work, how they do things a year in advance. I think a lot more people should follow it because it just
Yeah.
keeps you ahead of the game.
And that was my point. It's like because it moves so quickly for us consumers, we're just like in the moment, but we don't realize that no, they planned this out a year ago.
Oh
So,
yeah. Oh yeah,
but
you're definitely in it.
exactly, exactly. So I was going to ask you with the mentor, not the mentor, but the lady that you work for that said that you know you should just resign. Have you had an opportunity to have your paths crossed again?
Yes. And you know what, and when those paths cross, like we crossed paths a couple of times because I went back to work at Saks. I opened up a
Okay.
in the store. Um, and you know what happened? She didn't know who I was. And she asked me, she was like, "How are the kids?" And I'm like, "I don't have no kids." And it made me realize the amount of time that
Uh,
this woman has put into the industry. I don't even know how old June is now. She might be in her 60s, but just another number to this woman. You know,
yeah.
she has raised some of the top designers out of Paris and the Middle West or whatever, right? And grown them to these amazing businesses, billion-dollar businesses that they are right now. That little 6-month tenure that I had with her was really a blip to her. And at first, like I took offense. I'm like, this bitch don't even know who I am. But then I was like, but you know what? Damn, that's all it was. Like it really wasn't much to her. It was everything to me, but it was nothing
Yes.
to her. So when I
Yeah.
realized, I was like, well, you know what?
Uh,
It was just a job.
yeah. And
It was just
that's the point I was trying to make too, because it's I was just having this conversation. It's so interesting that you can have an experience that could devastate you, like that
oh
could
yeah.
level you. And
Mm-hmm.
then you encountered a person that was like, 100% responsible for it. And they're just like,
Yes.
oh, like, who are you? And like, they have
Right.
no idea. And it's like, it took me counseling and therapy in 2 years,
Sure. And
to
then
get
I
my,
said, I don't know if I should exist in this. I don't know how to dress. Like,
it's not funny, but that is such a
it's
real
funny
experience,
though.
right? When you're on the other side of it. And you can say that was a real experience. Like I went through all of this self-healing because I was cut so deep. And you
Yes.
just continue to swing your sword like it was nothing.
Don't
So
even know my name. She thought I had 3 kids.
that's crazy.
I was bewildered, but it really was just like, you know what? Again, the industries move so fast.
Yes.
And half of the time, people don't even know that they're
Ah,
doing. And to me, I said, I forgive you for
yeah.
derailing me for a bit because
Ah,
it gave me a lot more equipment to work with.
yeah.
Um, but yeah,
That
that
is
was fun. And then
something.
anytime I told her one time, I said, the kids are fine. The kids are fine. Like,
It's like, I don't know
my
who you think I am. That is
kids
so
are great.
interesting. That is so interesting. So you've had, and we didn't talk a lot about the CBD business. Did you want to tell a little bit more about that? Like, how
I
did
mean,
you get started in that from the fashion industry to that?
well, I think I had experienced a couple more fashion industry faux pas. I'm just like, y'all just annoying and crazy in this industry, and I didn't really have a
Ah,
strong voice when I was in it, even though I was like managing stores and running teams and
yeah,
stuff like that. I felt that I was tired of it.
yeah,
And I found a lot of peace whenever I was working out in the gym. So my trainer, another person just said something that just stuck with me. He was like, you're always
yeah,
much more happier when you're in the gym. Do you want to dig more into that? And I took his word on it, and I figured that the job that I was running a helmet laying store in
mhm,
Soho, and the regional manager was really, she was a cruel person.
oh,
Her energy was terrible, and I said, this is it. This is it. I need to go find another job. So I applied to Equinox, which is, one of the leading fitness clubs globally, honestly. And I interviewed really well. And the only difference that I was like, this is really weird for me. I was interviewing with a lot of men, like
yeah,
cocky men. And they hired me right away for a leadership position. I ran some of the leading clubs in the country. I learned so much, and I finally gained my voice
yeah.
working with these
I
jock
love
men.
that.
Okay.
Yes,
Because they were coming to me. I was like, what are you working on, Carolyn? I'm like, I don't know, Scott. Maybe you need to back up, and I really started to like figure out I actually have a voice. Like I can speak up for myself.
yes,
I can manage my own growth in these companies. And at one point I told them, I said, y'all need to pay me more because y'all are just, it's a lot of time I'm giving y'all. And another company poached me to open and design their fitness gym, which was like a private owned
oh
members only
wow,
thing. So I opened that for them. And in the process of being there, one of the clients, which it was always very like Virgil Abloh was one of the clients, like one of
wow,
the, yeah, we had very interesting people in that space. And one of the clients was like, yeah, like I take CBD and I put in my peanut butter. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And I saw what he was talking about. It was like in a sandwich bag, just very random. I said, that's how y'all do y'all little drugs and stuff. That's what it looked like. Mind you, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do anything. And I was like, so it's like non-psychoactive. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, I could get behind
wow,
something like that. And I said, but it looks ugly how y'all buy it. Like, y'all don't want it any better than it. So I started making gourmet treats with
yes,
CBD. And it stirred into this thing where, I made topical treatments and the trainers were testing it. They were like, what is this magic butter? And it turned into a thing. And the owner of the company found out about what I was doing. And that ended, but it's okay because they
something
paid
that,
me a
yeah,
lot. They paid me a lot for what they did. And I literally just said, okay, I don't
wow,
know anything about being an entrepreneur. I've always had a job to go to, a 401k and all this other stuff. And
wow,
my boyfriend's an entrepreneur as well. He's a real estate broker. And
wow,
he's the person that really, like, even though my dad was an entrepreneur, Carlos honestly exposed me to a lot more of the ins and outs of what it takes to own your own business and what that
Yeah.
looks like. And I dove right in. I was terrified. I was mad at him most of the time. I'm like, you made me do this. I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, you can't even help me. Like,
Uh,
you are thrown into water. You got to swim your way out. And I learned everything that I could about CBD. And it turned into Noir Bud. It turned into, getting paid for speaking engagements to teach other people about CBD. It turned into a lot of things. And it's a saving grace for a lot of people. And, if they have cancer, if they have pain, if they have anxiety. So it just, it was one of those things where it wasn't something I was intentionally looking for, but I knew that I wasn't really in this space to work for anybody anymore.
yeah.
And it found me. And never in a million years would have been able to tell you in college, like, oh, I'm going to run a cannabis company.
Uh,
I don't even smoke. I don't even like the smoke in my throat. Like, it irritates me. But everything else, all the other things that I make it with, that's what I really do enjoy. So it found me. I didn't find it, so.
That is so, I mean, everything that you've done, like just the transition, to, and how you took different experiences and build something from it. And, I mean, I can't wait to go back and replay this because listening to, there's so many similarities in your path, although it's a different industry, but so many similarities. And I know I personally can gain a lot from just having this conversation with you. Because so many things that you said is like, yeah, it's like, tracking in my own experience as well. So you're still doing the Noir Bud, you're still doing the fashion stuff. How did you go back? And I know time is like getting away from us, but how did you get back into the fashion part of, because you're doing both now, right?
Yeah. So I own Noir Bud. I am a content creator for beauty and fashion, and I also do image consulting for
Yeah.
individuals, or if they need like a revamp on their brand, if they have a company, I do help with that. Again, it found me again. I can't hide from fashion. She finds me every time. I think it was 2020. I was at the height of Noir Bud. Noir Bud was killing it. It was a summer. Somehow I had a weird thought. I was like, what is going on with the makeup artist Bobby Brown? Like, I haven't heard her name in a while because I've always admired her work, the no makeup thing. And I found that she left the company, that she started her own thing called Jones Road Beauty. And I was like, well, if she made it, then I want to try. Like, she was my first makeup brand that I used as a young adult. And I like reposted one of their products. I was like, y'all, this is so good, blah, blah, blah. No intention of trying to influence. I was just like, I really like this stuff.
Wow.
They reached out to me. They started sending me gifts. And then it turned into, a partnership. And now we're going into 2 years working together. She called me on her own and said, I want you to work with us. I want to pay you this, that, and the third. Like on a Sunday, she called me during lunchtime, and that to me, that's how the content creation thing started to find me. And then from there, other brands were reaching out. And I'm like, you know what? This is a very creative space. It's a lucrative space as well. It's connected me to so many things that I've known about for all of my life. Like, these are people I've been studying for years. So it's a very cyclical thing. It's this in full circle moment. Even though I was working with June and she kicked me out, right? She told me to leave. Derek Lamb, a company that she introduced to Saks because he used to work at Michael Kors and they knew each other from there. They reached out to me and we're going to be working together. I said, this is crazy. So
I love it.
Always circles back, so, and I told them that, I said, I don't think y'all realize, like, I actually helped buy your first collection.
Wow.
So hell yeah, y'all can send me some stuff. What you want to do,
Oh my gosh.
It's just a full circle moment. And
Exactly.
That's that energy that I just always put out. Like, it'll come back if it's meant to be.
I love it. I love it so much, Carol. This has been so just encouraging and inspiring for me. And I know you are a super duper busy woman, and I appreciate it. But I want to do like this, just a conclusion. We've learned so much about you, so many different industries that you are, have your footprint in. So what's the conclusion? What would, and not to say that, this is the end, but for if you had to conclude a sentence right now, what would your concluding sentence be for the story of Carolyn Gray? I think I shared like a couple of examples. Did you need me to share an example?
No, it's just funny because now we're getting towards the end of the conversation. Oh, this is a really good book, actually.
Yes.
I like this book. It's a little bit
Yes.
of a page turner because there's some dramatic things that happen and there's some amazing things that, but I think
Exactly.
at this point, to ask what the character goes on to do is that I think she relentlessly attracted her dreams and exceeded her own expectations.
That's
So
beautiful.
that's where I'm at
Relentlessly
mentally.
attracted her dreams and exceeded her own expectations.
Mm-hmm.
What I do it.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That is
Yeah,
beautiful.
thank
Is there anything that you want to leave with the audience? Maybe somebody's out there, maybe making their second, go at something or their third go at something. Is there any words of encouragement that you want to just leave with them?
I like that you said third go because that's a
Yeah.
reality for a lot of
Yes.
people. Um, I know a lot of us, and I do a lot of fighting for what I want to repay my parents back because they gave me a lovely life. They really did, and I just want to take care of them. But something that always pulls me back to a grounded space is I think about making that little girl version of
Mm,
me really proud because she had endless thoughts
yes.
about what life could be. And I think that if I showed up in front of her and exposed what I've been doing and I want her to think I'm the coolest person, like cooler than
Yeah.
Michael Jackson. And Michael Jackson was everything. I want to be cooler than Michael Jackson to the little girl version of me. And I want her to be
Yes.
I want to be exactly that when I grow up.
I
And
love it.
that's my reminder.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Carolyn. This has been an absolute treat for me on this. I was going to say Monday, but it is Tuesday. But thank
Okay.
you so much for just spending your time and sharing your story with us. I'm sure people will get a lot from it. There's so many nuggets and so many things that can inspire, people that's coming up. And even though we're in different ages, I'm like, and I think that's the beauty of it, though, is because the experience is shared and it doesn't matter like what age you are, if you're young or older or whatever. Like I'm
Yeah.
listening to you and I'm like getting some real life nuggets that I'm going to implement in my own journey. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us and your story. Guys, hopefully you guys got something out of this. I know I got a ton, and I will be listening to this episode over and over again because there were so many great nuggets and so many points of journaling or reflection that you can get from it. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And until next time, blessing.
Wow. That was cool.
That was so much fun.